What are the three key fantasy football questions facing the 2023 Miami Dolphins ahead of training camp? It's time to break down Tua Tagovailoa and the rest of the team as we begin another edition and close another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing for sportingnews.com, covering NFL and fantasy football, so check out all the stuff there. It is a quiet time of the NFL offseason, the lull between mini camps and OTAs and training camp, so good time to check in on all 32 teams. We've gotten to 17 so far. We had our first AFC team broken down for you there with the Buffalo Bills. If you missed any of our key queries for the NFC, all those teams are up now. So 17 down, 15 more to go. We're in the middle of the AFC East. We talked about the Bills yesterday. That means in alphabetical order, we have to go to Miami and look at the Dolphins. So three key questions there we'll explore, looking at Tua Tagovailoa, looking at their wide receivers, and then that questionable backfield. We're trying to find some answers here for in 2023. So a lot of good stuff to break down with Miami. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms, and check us out wherever you get your podcast, subscribe. And we're your team every day. We're part of Locked On Network, your fantasy football team every day as well. So we got you covered here in advanced scouting mode. Not much going on with these teams, but that's a good time again to explore them. And the Dolphins are a good team to talk about because they have a lot of upside, we know, with their offense, thanks to the hiring of Mike McDaniel. They're rolling. We know how special their offense was immediately as he came over for the 49ers and put in that offense, and everyone just exploded in the principal roles except for running back. We'll see if there's any value there, but we'll start at quarterback. Always a good place to start. Look at Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle as well on the show. Let's dive right into it. And our first key question with the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, what is his value in the middle of the QB1 run in the back end? Let's explore that, shall we? And first, let's look at where he finished last year. He actually finished QB 15 overall, but when you take into account the games that he missed, he played 13 games. Average scoring, he was a QB 10. So even in the shallowest of leagues, he was a starter. So he was the last guy on the board in 10-team leagues, but very solidly in the middle of 12-team league every week starter. And that's what you were looking for when he was healthy. Now you look at the numbers from last year, 3,548 passing yards, 25 TDs, and only 8 interceptions, really not much running at all. He had been over 100 yards rushing in his first 2 seasons in the NFL, but that really dropped off. Again, McDaniel's offense is really about pocket passing. He only had 70 rushing yards, no scores there. So really, he's a fully passing-dependent fantasy football quarterback for the numbers we're looking for. So if you had projected his numbers over 17 games, check this out. He would have had 273 yards per game. That's a great number. 4,640 yards total. That's great, pushing towards 5,000. 33 passing touchdowns to only 10 interceptions. So that's pretty good for a guy that doesn't run to give you that type of back-end QB1 production. That's what you got from Tua. Now, really, you look at the situation, the injuries have to be factored in. He's not the most durable quarterback. We know the concussion issues that happened in the middle of last year, and things broke down for him a little bit. But when he was on the field, he was putting up big numbers in this offense. Really, when you look at it, nearly 2 TDs per game. When you look at it, 25 in 13 games and 273 yards, that's pushing 300 a game. So that 250 and 2 threshold we're looking for consistency and putting up the numbers, they were there for Tua for sure. So let's look at it, however, when we put him into the context of other quarterbacks. He finished ahead of many in terms of the average scoring last year, but some guys are ranked ahead of him. Those same guys that were scoring behind him. Justin Herbert is getting a bump up here in the Kellen Moore offense with the Chargers' weapons. Trevor Lawrence coming off a red-hot second half into the playoffs for the Jaguars and adding Calvin Ridley. He's up there. And Herbert and Lawrence do a little bit more running, we know, than Tua. Dak Prescott, despite the disappointment last year, looking at the new offense with Mike McCarthy calling the shots with Brian Schottenheimer, maybe a little bit of rebound there. I think that could be the guy that's a little bit odd man out there in this group. Deshaun Watson in a full season, we know what he can do there. The consistency we saw in Houston carrying over to Cleveland. Aaron Rodgers in a good situation with the one exciting team that is the Jets. And then you look at some guys that finished right around Tua last year. Can they do it again? These are some same question mark guys. Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, and Kirk Cousins. Of those guys, Smith and Jones give you a little bit of running. Cousins does not, and Cousins kind of falls right where Tua does in that same Jared Goff category, where great weapons, not going to give you a lot in terms of running, but can put up the numbers behind a good line. Really good guys to throw the ball to. So they're kind of in that boat. So when you look at it, I think Tua is down where you'd expect. He's at QB 11, but there's just too many guys there in front of him. We mentioned all those guys are there. Really, it goes Herbert, Lawrence, Prescott, and Watson all ahead of Tua in that mix as QB1s. Then Rodgers, Smith, Jones, and Cousins are all behind him when you look at the expert consensus rankings at quarterback. So I would be very careful about overdrafting Tua Tagovailoa. Again, he's not going to give you that running floor you're looking at. He's got some durability issues. You've got some quarterbacks with bigger upside. So I'm looking at Tua as a situation you could put in if you're doing a streaming combination there or platoon at quarterback. You can look there. I think he's one of the higher end QBs that you can look at as QB2s that you can look at starting in a deeper league, play the matchups a little bit. That's not a bad way to go this season if you're not banging the table for one of those really top guys. When we say that, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts going a little bit deeper than that, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Justin Fields. If you can't get one of those guys, then you might play that rotation game when you go on down after you get through the first half of QB1's top 6 in a 12-team league. Then you might play that, play the matchups, get guys that are capable of putting up the numbers, and Tua would fit right into that plan because he's a pocket passer. You may want to combine him with a runner type that could have some upside, maybe an Anthony Richardson if he can win the starting job as a rookie for the Colts. So a lot of things to think about, but that's where I would feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm not going to plug and play Tua as an every week starter. Again, the durability is not there. The consistency is still being worked on here. And the Dolphins, I think they will be in some higher scoring games. That's going to help with Josh Allen and now Aaron Rodgers in the division. So there's things to look forward to there. But again, I would be a little bit careful with Tua. Don't overdraft him. I think he falls borderline QB1. I wouldn't say that I'm going to look at him in the top 10 or even top 11. But deeper leagues, I think if you look at a QB14, it's a good value for sure to put him there in your lineup. But again, I do like him in combination with some of these other guys. Look at the schedule and see how things develop and put him in a combination versus, again, putting him as the solo starter. I just would not feel good about that here in 2023, despite the numbers. Again, he's not going to give you that rushing cushion you're looking for on top of the durability issues. All right, there you have a look at the first key question for the Miami Dolphins. We still have 2 more to go with here, looking at the wide receiver core and the backfield. So a lot to explore here and good stuff all around. We did see Tua and some of his teammates take some baseball batting practice for the Marlins. So that was interesting. And just thinking here, what do we like here with baseball now is the main sport of action here? Well, you can take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That's up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's only at FanDuel Sportsbook. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run in a particular game as a prop bet. It's all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, you can get paid instantly when playing on FanDuel. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball and a proud sponsor here of Locked On Network and Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, it is time to continue the show. We're looking at the Miami Dolphins. Again, subscribe and follow for free, Locked On Fantasy Football, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available for you on YouTube. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every dayers, again, we will have any other team in depth for you on our next show. That'll be the New England Patriots. A good way, right, to do the Patriots red, white, and blue going into the July 4th weekend. So we'll have that for you on Monday on the turn here. So good way to do that. Kickoff feels good to be patriotic with the Patriots there. And we will take Tuesday off to celebrate America, as you might too. So do that as well. And we'll have our look at Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets there for you next week as well. So a lot of good stuff coming here, and we'll get to all the teams. Don't you worry. If you miss any of the teams that we did before through the Buffalo Bills, check them out on our archives on Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, it is the time to dive into the second juicy question, looking at what's going on in South Beach with the Miami Dolphins. And here it is. Are Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle going to do this again? And the answer is, let's just get it out of the way. Absolutely, yes, it is possible and probable. All right, you have 120 vacated targets. This is the 11th fewest in the NFL for the Dolphins. Where did those guys go? Well, Mike Gesicki, he signed with the rival Patriots. He had 52 targets last year, so not a big factor in the passing game at all. You had Trent Sherfield. He ate up 51. And you have Chase Edmonds out of the backfield. He's gone. He had 17. So that's where your main sources of vacated targets are coming from. So between Gesicki and Sherfield, where it counts for Waddle and Hill, you had 103 vacated targets. Now, I know you have Cedric Wilson Jr., and he wasn't fully healthy, and he's their number 3 receiver, but it's really a drop-off. Without Sherfield there, there's not much to look at with the Dolphins wide receiver core. And that really helped, right? Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle were the only two options. They didn't even get Gesicki involved. 52 targets, very limited their work for the tight end, and that's why they didn't re-sign him. They had Durham Smythe, who's more of a blocking tight end. He's their starter, so he's not a guy that they're going to look at to necessarily have a big role in that capacity. Let's look at where Tyreek Hill finished last year. He was a wide receiver 3 in overall scoring, wide receiver 4 in average half-point PPR scoring. He's ranked as wide receiver 4 now. Let's look at Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver 7 in overall scoring, wide receiver 13 in average. So he actually dropped all the way down to the top wide receiver 2 when you look at the average, where Tyreek Hill stood up there as wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, however you look at it. And Jaylen Waddle conservatively is ranked wide receiver 11 here. Look at these numbers from last year. These are insane, the way these guys put up big digits here. 170 targets for Tyreek Hill, caught 119 for 1,710 yards and 10 TDs. He had whopping per catch average for Jaylen Waddle to really help him. Remember, he was a dink and dunk type receiver before we had the influence of Mike McDaniel. He was a field stretcher, only 75 catches, 170 targets. So he had fewer targets than Hill had catches, but made the most of it with 1,356 yards and 8 TDs. So made a lot of big plays to get those numbers. So we know big plays can be volatile. So can be the touchdowns. But I think these two guys are indoctrinated so much in the offense. They're kind of like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk from what we see from the 49ers offense, but doing it at the same time and also not worrying about a key presence at tight end such as George Kittle with Mike Gesicki gone out of the mix. So you have some more targets to eat up for both these guys. So the opportunity is there. So even if the big plays come a little bit fewer here for Waddle and they adjust to defenses, that is, to look at Waddle as a big play threat and try to contain him a little bit more, you're still going to get higher volume to put up numbers potentially. So you have those vacated targets that are going to bump things up. Both of these guys are pretty good in short areas for scoring and as well as stretching the field and big play touchdowns. So overall, you love this. So Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle in a great situation. They are arguably in a better situation than were last year because they're not so dependent on those touchdowns and big plays to put up numbers when there's going to be more targets coming their way, more isolation and importance for these two wide receivers that you see in Miami. Again, they'll line up Wilson in there, but not much after him at wide receiver. Again, Tua is locked in with both these guys. They tended to produce even when Tua's not there. You have a better backup situation in Mike White as well, so you can go in that direction if these guys are not there to produce. So really like everything about this situation for Hill and Waddle repeating some of their numbers. Now, we can't tell you exactly how they're going to finish. Hill could have a little bit of slide, Waddle could have a little bit of a bump and kind of meet in the middle here, but they're still elite receivers. I still see the potential of Hill and Waddle both finishing overall as half-point PPR wide receiver ones. Again, it's hard to duplicate those seasons, but these guys are in the groove and an ideal offense. Hill has a few more years left. Now, there's one thing to think about with Hill. There's a little bit more trouble maybe off the field. We'll see if the NFL investigates and finds anything more there. Is there anything to merit a suspension? We know that the Chiefs were prepared for something a few years ago when they drafted Mecole Hardman, but nothing materialized there too much with Hill. So overall, you really like their chances to produce. So as long as Hill's on the field, he's there. Obviously, if Hill faces some kind of discipline and has to miss time, Waddle gets a huge bump up here. But I think overall, when you look at it, Waddle actually might be the better value a few picks later than Hill, where you can get good return on your investment. If you can get Hill, I think you have to use a high draft pick in the top 5 at wide receiver, where Waddle, you can probably use a top 12 situation on Waddle and still get pretty high return as a wide receiver 1. So something to think about there. The Waddle, if you're debating a Hill versus someone else at a position, you might go in the other direction. And then think about if you're confident to maybe overdraft can be a little aggressive with Waddle with their next pick. All right, there you have 2 key questions from Miami Dolphins. We got one more to look at. We will explore that in our final segment here on the show and look at that. So again, subscribe and follow for free wherever you get your podcast. We really enjoy that you're joining us here, and we got a lot more to come here, breaking down all the teams for you, the ideal situations for fantasy football for every team, trying to shed light there before we get some more real answers in training camp. So check us out here again. If you missed anything, we're bringing it to you all offseason and season long. If you're new to the podcast, welcome in, and hopefully you'll subscribe and find our insight and information, what you need. Straight, no nonsense, forward to the point. That's what we give you here on Locked On Fantasy Football. It is time to close the show and ask the final key question for the Miami Dolphins. What do you do with this backfield? Do you trust any running back in Miami? Let's look at the numbers from what we had last year first. You have only 52 vacated touches, 42 vacated carries. Those all belong to Chase Edmonds. So Chase Edmonds is gone. Okay, so we create a little bit of opportunity? Maybe not. Let's look at last year's scoring. Their top overall running back was Raheem Mostert. He finished as RB 26. In terms of average points per game, RB 31. So you had a guy, either way you look at it, as a flex play more than an RB 2. Because of that, you had Jeff Wilson Jr., and he had RB 29 finish overall, RB 35. So he came over from the 49ers. After the 49ers got McCaffrey, they pretty much were the same running back, and why would you not think that? They're speedy, quick guys that came from the 49ers, followed McDaniel to this running system. You knew they were going to put plug-and-play numbers. We knew that they were also going to have the same durability issues. So Mostert and Wilson have pretty much been the same runners for quite some time, but what's really remarkable is both these guys actually stayed healthy to be rather productive here, but they split pretty strongly here, and usage and the toggling between the injuries. Now their rankings, let's check this out. This is just not very inspiring. You have Jeff Wilson as RB 43.5 point PPR, according to expert consensus on Fantasy Pros. You have Raheem Mostert at 45, and Devin Akane, that's how you say his name, is at 48. He's the rookie from Texas A&M. So there's a guy right there that's going to replace Chase Edmonds on this depth chart. And guess what? They also brought back Myles Gaskin. Now, I'm not feeling great about Gaskin necessarily making a team. Well, there's special teams they can consider with Akane and Gaskin, Wilson, Mostert. So it is crowded in this backfield. And everyone's looking at, why aren't they going after Dalvin Cook? Where's this Dalvin Cook trade? Well, it seems less and less likely. This team threw 62% of the time last year. Do they really need to invest in Dalvin Cook when they have this backfield that's decent? It's not spectacular. When you put Mostert and Wilson's numbers as a two-headed monster, for reality, they were pretty effective here. So I just don't see Dalvin Cook suddenly, okay, we're going to get him and clean up this whole thing. They don't need to clean up this whole thing. They won, and their offense was spectacular, and they're passing first team. They're not a running team. So let's see. But if they get Dalvin Cook, that would be an indication that they're not happy with these guys. They think Mostert and Wilson still have durability issues. They don't think Kane is ready for a big role right away. And then Dalvin might get the touches. But we'll have to wait and see on that. In their current state, however, you really can't trust these guys. That's why the rankings are 43, 45, and 48, right? We don't know. This is a very fickle backfield. We know it in San Francisco, right? Until they got Christian McCaffrey, you didn't feel they were cemented with one guy that they could trust there with Kyle Shanahan. And so you look at the same deal here with Mike McDaniel. And I think this is a situation I want to avoid a lot in fantasy this year. If you're stuck and you need a flex play, yes, you can invest in Wilson or Mostert. But if Wilson and Mostert go down, you might have the other guy healthy to take over. You don't know who's going to get hurt there. You think you need both of these guys to go on the shelf and break down for Devin Akane to have real value. I think he's a guy that you look at in dynasty leagues a little bit more as a rookie that would have value. But in terms of immediate value, it's going to take an injury. You'd have to stash him behind other Wilson Mostert. I wouldn't draft this entire backfield. Absolutely not. But I'm going to look for value. I'm going to look for deep flex for Wilson and Mostert and look for Akane as a flyer later in the draft. So still a lot to figure out. Of course, Dalvin Cook changes the whole game, and you probably bump him up all the way to RB2. But right now, this is how we're looking at the Dolphins backfield. So don't trust anyone here. It's very hard to do that. And the injury issues are prevalent, and there's not a lot of wiggle room here for the production in this backfield, whether it's targets and getting more work there or in the rushing attack for the Dolphins. It's already limited again, 38% running team from last year. There you have it. There's a breakdown of the Miami Dolphins and the three key questions here as we head into the weekend, a little bit ahead of July 4th. Again, we will celebrate July 4th by looking at the New England Patriots on the July 3rd show on Monday. So we'll have that up for you. So that's a good team to look at. Mac Jones and his slightly different weapons here in 2023. So thanks again for making us your first listen and staying with us with our look at the Miami Dolphins. Bills were before us. Patriots are next. All good stuff. So for Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great pre-holiday weekend, and we'll catch you on this other side with a look at the Patriots.